When my daughter, Sarah, and her husband, John, left me at the Los Angeles airport without a single cent or any identification, believing I was there to ask for money, I knew it was time to teach them the true meaning of losing everything. They had no clue why I had really come or what I was doing. When they eventually found out, they begged for my forgiveness. John's voice cut through the noise of the terminal like broken glass as he declared they would not be giving me any more money. My journey came to an abrupt halt. The gift bag containing a science kit for my grandson, Leo, suddenly felt incredibly heavy in my hand. Passengers flowed around us near the gate, creating a wall of sound that seemed to muffle everything except my son-in-law's accusation. Completely baffled, I shifted my overnight bag and told him I had not asked for anything. Sarah stepped beside him, her arms crossed. Her business jacket was wrinkled from the car ride, and stress lines were etched around eyes that had once brightened when they saw me. She told me to stop pretending, mentioning how I had been calling more and more with some kind of emergency. My heart sank. The last time I had called was 3 weeks ago just to hear Leo's voice after his soccer game. Before that, it had probably been a month. I tried to explain that I had flown there for Leo's birthday, that I had brought him a gift. But John moved closer, telling me that my dependency on them had to end and that Sarah needed space from my constant emotional demands. The words felt like physical blows. The $50,000 check in my jacket pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I told them I didn't understand, repeating that I was there to celebrate Leo's 10th birthday and that I had something for them both. John simply took my daughter's elbow and said they were finished enabling my neediness, telling me to solve my own problems for once. I reached toward my jacket, desperate to show them the check, but my daughter stopped me. Her voice had a hardness I had never heard before. She insisted they needed a real break from me and said that maybe when I learned some boundaries, they could talk again. The gift bag slipped from my trembling fingers. The expensive microscope kit for Leo tumbled across the terminal floor, its colorful wrapping paper tearing against the tile. A security guard started walking slowly toward us. John took my phone, the one I had given my daughter just minutes earlier when I had hugged her, and put it in his own pocket. He told me it would stay with them until I proved I could respect their limits. They turned and walked away. My daughter's heels clicked in perfect rhythm with her husband's confident stride. They never looked back, not even when I called out my daughter's name. The security guard reached me as other passengers stepped around the scattered gift box components. He asked if I was okay. I just stood there, staring at the spot where my daughter had been standing. I remembered how last Christmas, Leo had hugged me tight and whispered that he loved me. That same boy was waiting at home, probably wondering where his grandpa was. I looked down at my shaking hands and the torn wrapping paper. I told the guard I needed to get to a hotel. Later, I would find out that as they drove away from the airport, John had slammed the car door with a sharp, satisfied movement. In the passenger seat, Sarah had just stared straight ahead. When they merged into traffic, John said that he was glad I finally got the message. My daughter had twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I knew she had, and mentioned how confused I had looked. John dismissed my appearance as a part of my strategy to play the victim and make her feel guilty. He called it classic emotional manipulation. As they drove, Sarah had watched planes ascending in the distance, thinking about how they were carrying people toward reunions, not away from them. She had also questioned when I had last actually asked for money. John's grip on the steering wheel tightened, and he explained that I was always fishing for information about their finances. Sarah had slowly nodded, the way she always did when John explained something to her that she had not considered. He continued to say that my surprise visit and the gift were all calculated to test their boundaries. By the time they reached their neighborhood, Sarah's resistance to his narrative had dissolved. Inside the house, John went straight to his laptop and angled the screen toward Sarah. He was looking at a 4-bedroom colonial in Beverly Hills that had just been reduced to $800,000. Sarah moved to the kitchen and began preparing dinner, watching the same plate twice while he scrolled through real estate listings. His confidence expanded with each click. His phone rang, and he told his friend that he had handled the old man situation today. Sarah found herself staring at Leo's art project on the refrigerator, a drawing of the three of them, plus me, all stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. The teacher had written, "Families Love," across the top. At 6 o'clock, they picked up Leo from his after-school program. He bounded into the back seat, asking if his grandpa James was coming for his birthday. My daughter caught her husband's eye in the rearview mirror, and his expression remained calm and controlled. He told Leo that I couldn't make it this time. Leo's face fell, but he didn't argue. He had learned when a discussion was over. That evening, after Leo had gone to bed, my daughter found herself holding her phone. She tried to call my number twice, but both calls went straight to voicemail. John had my phone in his jacket pocket, which was why she could not reach me. John told her to give me time to think about my behavior. He assured her that I would call and apologize within a week. My daughter put her phone down, but her fingers kept reaching for it. My hotel room at the LAX Marriott smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and recycled air. I sat in a single chair by the window, watching planes taxi across the runway in the darkness. The room service tray sat untouched on the desk. The check lay on the bedside table, slightly wrinkled from when it had fallen with the gift bag. I had carefully smoothed it out, noting the smudged ink where my thumb had pressed against Sarah's name. 8 o'clock became 9, then 10. I pulled out my wallet and found the photo I had carried for 15 years. Sarah in her cap and gown, her smile bright with possibility. She had hugged me that day, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Daddy, I did it. We did it." The hotel silence pressed against me as I remembered her wedding. She had wanted everything perfect, and John had been charming, thanking me repeatedly for making their dream day possible. I remembered giving them a check for $65,000. Sarah had cried when I handed her the check, saying, "This is more than I ever dreamed." I thought about Leo's birth. There were complications during delivery, and he had to spend a week in the NICU. They faced $30,000 in medical bills, so I had flown out immediately and spent 3 days sleeping in a hospital waiting room chair. When Leo finally came home, Sarah had held my hand, saying she didn't know what they would have done without me. Then I remembered their first house. John had found the perfect starter home, but they were short on the down payment. I had given them $80,000. John had done most of the talking that time, saying that a father-in-law should help his family. Sarah had just nodded along. I could see her changing. John's business venture was a food delivery app that was supposed to revolutionize the industry. I had given them $120,000. I had hesitated because his pitch felt practiced and artificial, but Sarah had looked so hopeful. The app failed within 6 months. During the pandemic, they both lost their jobs temporarily. I gave them $3,200 a month for 22 months to cover their mortgage, utilities, and insurance. By then, there was no gratitude, just an expectation of my support. Then came the gradual cooling. Phone calls grew shorter, and visits became rarer. John's words like boundaries, healthy distance, and financial dependence started to creep into my daughter's conversations. My own grief from losing my wife, Evelyn, had made me reach out more, and it had somehow made me seem needier in their eyes. I found the hotel notepad and began calculating. I added up the money for the wedding, the medical bills, the house, John's failed business, the pandemic support, and smaller amounts over the years for car repairs and Leo's private school fees. The total made my chest tighten. Over 15 years, I had given them $647,000. My hotel phone rang at midnight, and the front desk was checking if I needed anything. I assured them I was fine, even though I knew I wasn't. More memories flooded back. I remembered Evelyn's warnings before she died, telling me not to let my grief make me too generous and that they needed to value what they received. But after her funeral, when John had suggested I move closer to them and Sarah had seemed genuinely concerned about my loneliness, supporting them had felt like a way of showing my love. Leo's first steps had been toward me, and his first word after "Mama" and "Dada" had been "Grandpa." Every birthday and school play I attended felt like an investment in our relationship, not a transaction that required gratitude. But somewhere along the way, John had reframed everything. My grief had become neediness. My generosity had become manipulation. My love had become a burden. At 2 in the morning, I opened my laptop and connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi. I found the website for my longtime legal counsel in Manhattan, Mark Thompson and Associates. I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about the look on Leo's face when he found out I wouldn't be at his birthday. I thought about the $647,000 I had freely given that had been so easily dismissed. I thought about my own daughter walking away without looking back. I had given them everything. Now it was time to show them what nothing looked like. The 6 a.m. flight to JFK felt like a trip backward through time. In my window seat, my laptop open, I reviewed 15 years of bank records. I had kept meticulous documentation of every transfer, check, and automatic payment. I calculated what the $647,000 would be if it were reclassified as a loan with compound interest. I opened a new spreadsheet, labeling the columns with the same precision I had once used for my Fortune 500 clients. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory from 4 decades in finance. 8 hours later, I was standing in Mark Thompson's office, my files spread across his conference table like evidence. Mark reviewed the documents with the same intensity he had once applied to my merger contracts. He told me that legally every gift could be reclassified as a loan, especially because of the pattern of increasing demands and diminishing gratitude. I had trusted his judgment for years, and his professional assessment felt like a vindication. He typed some numbers into his calculator. The total amount, with reasonable interest compounded annually, came to $847,000. He said it was a bulletproof case and that we could file immediately. I told him to do it. He looked up from his notes, asking me if I was certain and telling me that it would fundamentally change my relationship with my daughter. I thought about her walking away, John taking my phone, and Leo waiting for a grandfather who would never arrive for his birthday. I told Mark they had already changed it, and I was just making it official. The next morning, I sat in my Upper East Side apartment, making methodical phone calls. I called my bank first, the same institution I had used for 30 years. The representative asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel the multiple years of automatic payments to the Morrison household. I told him I was completely certain. By 11:30 a.m. in Los Angeles, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I let it ring a few times before answering. She sounded confused, saying their mortgage payment had failed and that the bank had told her I canceled the automatic transfer. I told her I thought she needed a break from me. She stammered, saying they didn't mean financially, and I asked her what she meant exactly. I could hear John's urgent voice in the background. She begged me not to do this, mentioning that Leo's school tuition was due this week. I told her that John seemed very confident about handling their family's problems independently. I ended the call and turned off the phone's ringer. 15 minutes later, she called again, but I didn't answer. Mark returned from lunch and found me still in his office. I told him Phase 1 was complete and that we should discuss Phase 2. I would later find out my daughter had been staring at the bank statement, watching the numbers blur through her exhaustion. John had come in from the garage, and his confidence from 2 days ago had started to crack around the edges, but he still tried to act calm. He dismissed the cold coffee and told her that I was bluffing and would crack in a week. She pushed the statement toward him, telling him their insurance and utilities had also bounced. He grabbed the paper, and his face hardened with anger. He called my actions emotional manipulation and classic narcissistic behavior. My daughter had once trusted his assessment, but now, with the bills scattered on their counter like accusations, doubt crept through her exhaustion. She told him they needed to call me and apologize. He slammed his mug down and said they absolutely would not do that. She reminded him that Leo's school tuition was due soon. He told her they would figure it out, with what money she did not know. He then got a calculating look on his face, called Leo down, and started to record a video. He told my grandson that I had been having some problems and that he needed to tell me how much he missed me. I would later learn that he coached my grandson through tears and used his genuine love for me as a weapon. He told my daughter to send the video with a message that said, "Fix this, or you'll never see him again." My daughter's finger hovered over the send button. On the screen, Leo's face was streaked with tears as he asked why his grandpa didn't love him anymore. Sarah told her husband that it felt wrong, but he insisted it was a strategy to protect their family. She sent the video. That afternoon, John started a networking campaign. He called my former colleagues in Manhattan, spinning elaborate stories about my supposed confusion and family harassment. He called my neighbor and even the doorman at my building. Each conversation was designed to paint me as unstable and unreliable. My daughter retreated to Leo's room, where her son was surrounded by photos of our family vacations. He asked her if he had made me mad. My daughter looked at the pictures and told him that sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems and that I still loved him. My daughter knew that for 10 years I had been completely devoted to him. In every picture, she saw the pure joy on my face when I looked at my grandson. Her phone buzzed, and it was an unknown number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Mark Thompson from my law firm and said that they needed to discuss her father's loan documentation. Her blood ran cold. He was calling to inform her that formal legal proceedings had been initiated regarding the $847,000 in outstanding family loans. He said that they would need to schedule a meeting to review the terms. The phone slipped from her hand. John appeared in the doorway and asked who it was. My daughter stared at him as the full magnitude of their situation finally crystallized. I had not just stopped supporting them. I had declared war. The morning sunlight in my Manhattan apartment felt sharper and more focused. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the 3 decades of business relationships I had carefully maintained. Each one was a potential pressure point in my campaign against John and my daughter. My lawyer, Mark, arrived exactly at 9, carrying a thick leather portfolio filled with documentation. He settled into the chair across from my desk and announced that the loan paperwork was officially filed. The total was $847,000, with standard family lending terms and compound interest. I nodded, already moving on to the next phase. On my computer, I had organized my contacts into 3 strategic categories: financial industry connections, John's tech industry network, and social circle infiltration. After 40 years in business, I had relationships John couldn't even imagine. I told Mark that David Chen, a senior vice president at the bank that held my daughter and son-in-law's mortgage, was available for lunch. Mark raised an eyebrow, and I explained that I wasn't asking him to break any rules, but simply to share some family concerns about borrower stability. At the restaurant, David and I sat at our usual corner table. I had always appreciated his methodical approach to risk assessment. David commented that I looked well and asked me how I was handling retirement. I kept my tone conversational as I told him I was dealing with some family concerns. I told him I was worried about my daughter and son-in-law's financial judgment. After 20 years of friendship, he recognized my serious tone and his fork paused on the way to his mouth. I continued, mentioning that John's employment history, with frequent job changes, failed business ventures, and a pattern of financial overreach, was concerning. He told me he could not discuss specific accounts. I said that I was just sharing my concerns as a family member and that John had convinced my daughter to live beyond their means. I told him I had been supporting them for years but had recently discovered they were misrepresenting their financial stability. Misrepresentation was a serious word in banking. He put his wine glass down. I added that their ability to meet mortgage obligations was questionable, and I thought he should know. After lunch, I returned to my apartment and began the second phase, activating my industry network. Patricia Williams answered on the second ring, sounding pleased to hear from me. She had been an HR director for 8 years, and we had maintained a professional friendship since meeting at industry conferences. More importantly, John had interviewed at her company last year. I told her I was calling about a delicate matter regarding John. She said she remembered interviewing him and that he seemed capable enough. I told her I was concerned about his financial judgment and that family pressures were affecting his work focus and professional reliability. Her tone shifted to professional interest, and she asked about the kind of financial pressures. I explained that he had substantial family debt, made poor spending decisions, and had a history of failed business ventures. She thanked me for the heads up, saying that professional references did not always cover personal financial stability. 3 more calls followed with the same result. I spoke with Marcus Rodriguez, Jennifer Kim, and Tom Bradley. Each conversation was carefully crafted with no lies or exaggerations, just my professionally expressed concerns about my son-in-law's financial judgment and how his family pressures were affecting his work performance. By 6 o'clock, I had planted strategic doubts in the minds of 5 key people in John's professional network. It was not enough to destroy him but was sufficient to make potential employers hesitate and choose a safer candidate. My phone buzzed with an email notification that said John's employment application had been withdrawn from Digital Dynamics Corporation. I smiled for the first time since my trip to LAX. My lawyer called me as I was preparing dinner and said that my approach was remarkably sophisticated. He reminded me that the goal was financial recovery, not destruction. As I looked out my window at the city lights, I told him that they had destroyed our relationship first and that I was simply showing them the financial consequences of that choice. I thought about the third phase, social pressure, and how John valued his image and status. It was time to show him how quickly a reputation could crumble. Another email notification chimed, stating that an application had been withdrawn due to incomplete reference verification. A week after I had started the legal strike, my daughter and son-in-law sat across from the branch manager at their bank. I could picture the sterile conference room and the folder filled with their financial catastrophe. I could also imagine John's aggressive posturing masking his growing panic. From my Manhattan apartment, I had orchestrated the meeting without lifting a finger. My casual inquiry to David Chen about their stability had triggered standard risk assessment protocols. I listened to the voicemail on my phone after my daughter had called me on speakerphone. I listened to it twice, savoring every detail. My daughter was begging me to call her back. She said the bank was reviewing their mortgage and had mentioned information about financial instability. She didn't understand what was happening. I deleted the message without a response. The next call came from Leo's school. His monthly tuition had bounced again. They said the grace period was 10 days. I found great entertainment in watching John's job search. Through the network I had carefully planted, I tracked his interview schedule like a hunter. A corporation had cut his interview short after Patricia Williams shared her concerns about his reliability. Another company decided on an internal promotion instead. Another's enthusiasm evaporated after a casual conversation between their CEO and Marcus Rodriguez about difficult family situations affecting professional judgment. My daughter's work situation had also started to predictably deteriorate. Her supervisor called for a performance review after she missed another client deadline. The stress from our family situation was affecting her professional competence, exactly as I had calculated. I was given a pause when I considered Leo's suffering. My daughter's voicemails became increasingly desperate, not about money, but about her son's confusion. The 10-year-old kept calling me from the school phone, leaving heartbreaking messages asking if he had done something wrong. I kept those messages. They reminded me that John deserved everything he was getting. The social pressure campaign launched on day 8. Westwood was a small community where reputation was very important. When John's car was repossessed from their driveway on a Tuesday, 3 of their neighbors witnessed it. When my daughter started shopping at the discount grocery store and using coupons, the change didn't go unnoticed. Their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called me directly and expressed her concern about my daughter. She said that she looked terrible and had dark circles under her eyes. She also said that John had been drinking more and that their lawn had not been mowed in a couple of weeks. She asked if there was anything she could do, and I suggested that a casserole would be a nice gesture. Her casserole delivery provided perfect cover for intelligence gathering. Within days, the neighborhood whisper network had activated. They were talking about financial troubles and a possible separation. John's paranoia escalated beautifully. He confronted his neighbor, Tom Bradley, and accused him of spreading lies about our family. Tom was confused by the unprovoked aggression and shared the incident with other neighbors. My daughter's isolation deepened when their golf club membership was suspended for unpaid dues. Their gym membership also followed. These small embarrassments announced their financial freefall to everyone in their social circle. But John's most destructive decision came on day 10. Desperate for income, he had applied for a title loan against their house without my daughter's knowledge. The interest rates were predatory, and the terms were devastating. I learned about it through my banking connections before my daughter did. David Chin mentioned it during our weekly check-in call, confirming that John's desperation had reached a dangerous level. He said that John had applied for asset-based lending against the house, which was a risky move. He said they had not approved the loan because his credit profile was too unstable. He said that John would end up with predatory lenders if he was not careful. My daughter discovered her husband's scheme when she found the paperwork hidden in his desk drawer. Her phone call to me at midnight woke me from the soundest sleep I had had in weeks. She begged me, saying that he was going to lose their home. I let her finish her explanation before I responded with mathematical precision. I told her the solution was simple. She had to pay back the $847,000 she owed me plus interest, and then I would resume financial support. She said they did not have that kind of money. I told her she should have considered that before walking away from me at the airport. I hung up and turned off my ringer. I knew that the next day Patricia Williams would receive an anonymous tip about John's financial desperation, making him a security risk for any company that handled sensitive data. The third phase was proceeding exactly as planned. By the second week of my campaign, Westwood's gossip network had fully activated around the family crisis. I monitored their social destruction from 3,000 miles away through a combination of strategic contacts and social media surveillance that would have impressed my former competitors. My daughter's attempt to maintain normalcy crumbled at Leo's school pickup on Tuesday. While she was waiting in the carpool line, a woman with the same last name as her husband, but no relation, approached my daughter's car with concerned friendliness. She asked my daughter if everything was all right and told her that she looked exhausted. I learned from Mrs. Patterson that my daughter's response had been a 20-minute breakdown in front of other parents. The story spread through the school's parent group within hours. They talked about their financial troubles and the family conflict that Leo was caught in. The principal called my daughter in for a conference about Leo's deteriorating behavior. My grandson had gotten into 3 fights in 2 weeks. His grades had dropped from straight A's to C's. The school counselor reported that Leo had been asking questions about broken families and had been desperately trying to call me from the school phone. The principal slid a piece of construction paper across his desk and told my daughter that Leo had drawn it yesterday. The drawing showed 4 stick figures under a dark cloud. 3 of the figures were holding hands, but the 4th, labeled Grandpa in Leo's careful handwriting, stood apart with a large X drawn through it. My daughter's workplace situation was also deteriorating. Her supervisor had documented 3 missed deadlines and 2 client complaints about distracted service. The performance improvement plan she signed included mandatory counseling and a 60-day probation period. But John's unraveling provided the most satisfaction. His paranoid behavior at community gatherings became legendary. At the Westwood Farmers Market, he confronted another man and accused him of spreading rumors about our finances. The man, who barely knew John, shared the bizarre encounter with his wife, who shared it with her book club, who then shared it with her neighbors. John's drinking was visibly escalating. Mrs. Patterson reported that the number of wine bottles in their recycling bin was multiplying weekly. His appearance had degraded. He was unshaven, and his clothes were wrinkled. He had the hollow-eyed look of a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. The community's response followed a predictable pattern. Initial sympathy for the family gradually shifted to whispered speculation about John's responsibility. When he shouted at a teenage neighbor for riding his skateboard too close to their driveway, even my daughter's longtime friends began to question John's stability. Leo's emotional needs created additional pressure points I had not anticipated. His teacher called my daughter with concerns about Leo's repeated statements that I did not love him anymore. She said that he kept asking other children if their grandparents ever stopped loving them. She said that it was heartbreaking and that she was hoping there was a way to resolve what was happening with his grandfather. I learned that my daughter's response was another public breakdown in the school hallway, where she sobbed that her father was punishing a 10-year-old for adult problems. The irony was exquisite. My daughter finally understood that I was willing to hurt Leo to hurt her, but she had the causation completely backward. John's job search became a community joke. His interview at a neighborhood favorite lasted only 15 minutes before Patricia Williams escorted him out. His application to Startup Hub was withdrawn due to reference concerns. His networking attempts at a monthly mixer ended with him arguing with potential employers. Jennifer Kim, the tech recruiter, called me personally to report John's desperate attempts to reach out. She said that my son-in-law had contacted her 6 times the day before and that his behavior was becoming concerning. She asked if she should be worried about her safety. I carefully replied that John was under significant stress and recommended that she document any threatening behavior. She said that he had specifically mentioned me, saying that I was sabotaging his career. I told her that John was facing the consequences of his own choices. The title loan application that John had hidden from my daughter was approved by a predatory lender that was charging 37% interest. When my daughter discovered the paperwork, her call to her husband's phone went straight to voicemail. According to Mrs. Patterson, he was at a tavern drinking alone in the afternoon. My daughter found the paperwork spread across John's desk like evidence of his betrayal. She saw that he had been researching how to sell Leo's college fund investments without her consent. My daughter's phone call to me woke me from the soundest sleep I had had in weeks. She told me she had found out what John had been doing, the lies he had told me at the airport, the lies he had been telling everyone about me, and the financial decisions he had been making without telling her. I let her talk without interruption, noting how she had shifted from saying "we" to saying "John" in her language. She said that he was going to destroy their house, Leo's education, and their entire life, and she couldn't stop him. I told her that she could have stopped him 2 weeks ago by choosing me over her husband's manipulation. She said she knew that now and begged me to not let him drag them down with him, offering to leave him and move back to New York with Leo. This was the offer I had been waiting for, but the timing was not right. He needed to complete his own destruction first. I told her to call me tomorrow and we would discuss the terms. The next morning, my daughter slammed the title loan papers onto the kitchen table, which made John jump and spill coffee across his wrinkled shirt. He had been drinking until 3 in the morning, and his bloodshot eyes struggled to focus on the documents scattered before him. She demanded he explain the papers, her voice carrying a fury he had never heard before. She accused him of risking their house without telling her. He wiped the coffee from his chin with a trembling hand and said that it was just a backup plan and that they were not actually going to use it. She grabbed the paperwork, waving it at him, and pointed out the fast cash title loan with 37% interest. She told him it was their home and Leo's home. He told her he was trying to solve their problems while she was crying about her father. My daughter stared at her husband, who was unshaven and reeked of wine. He was making financial decisions that could destroy their son's stability. The man she had married seemed like a stranger wearing John's face. By 10, she had forced him into the car and driven to the title loan office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he reluctantly requested to withdraw his application. The loan officer told them that they had already run a credit check and that it would stay on his report. In the parking lot, John exploded. He told her that she did not have any better ideas, that my precious father had them trapped, and that she had forged his signature. My daughter held up the preliminary paperwork and said that he had been going to risk everything without even telling her. John's mouth opened, then closed. There was no denial, just the hollow look of a man caught in his final lie. The call from Leo's new school came at 2 p.m., interrupting my daughter's attempt to salvage a client presentation. The school's counselor spoke with professional concern about another incident where Leo had gotten into a fight. She said that another child had made comments about his family's financial situation. My daughter closed her office door, her hands shaking. She asked what kind of comments had been made. The counselor said the other child's mother had told him that their family was broke and crazy, and Leo had responded with his fists. Driving to the school, my daughter realized that the gossip network had reached even the children. Leo sat in the principal's office, his uniform shirt torn and knuckles scraped. He looked smaller than his 10 years. He whispered that he just wanted Grandpa Kenneth back. He said that everything was better when I loved them. Christina's disciplinary meeting with her supervisor, Margaret, came the next morning. 3 missed deadlines documented. 2 client complaints about distracted service. Personal phone calls during important meetings. Christina, I've been patient because I know you're dealing with family issues. Margaret's voice carried genuine concern mixed with business reality. But this pattern can't continue. Consider this a formal warning. I understand. Christina's voice sounded hollow, even to herself. Is there anything the company can do to help? Employee assistance program? Personal leave? Christina almost laughed. Personal leave would solve nothing when PS was systematically destroying everything Kenneth had built for them over 15 years. That evening, she found Pierce in his home office surrounded by empty beer bottles and credit card applications. Not just 1 or 2, a dozen different companies, all promising instant approval for qualified applicants. P.S. What is this? He looked up with a guilty expression of a child caught stealing emergency backup plans. We've already maxed out 4 cards. Our credit is destroyed. She picked up an application for a store card with 49% interest. This is insanity. Your father's trying to destroy us. No. Christina's clarity felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You destroyed us. You planned that airport confrontation, didn't you? Pierce's silence was answer enough. You coached me on what to say. You took his phone. You walked away first. The memories rearranged themselves with devastating accuracy. Dad looked genuinely confused because he hadn't asked us for money. He was getting too dependent. He flew here with a $50,000 check for Michael's birthday. Pierce, he came to give, not take. Pierce's face crumpled like wet paper. He was threatening our independence. No, he was threatening your control over me. The next day brought a noise complaint from their neighbors. Police arriving at 2 in the afternoon to find Pierce shouting at the television drunk on a Tuesday while Michael was still at school. Mrs. Patterson called Christina at work with barely concealed concern. Dear, I think Pierce might need help. Professional help. Christina left work early, finding Pierce passed out in his office chair while Michael needed pickup from school. She stared at her husband, the man who'd convinced her that her father's love was manipulation, that generosity was control, that needing family was weakness. For the first time in 3 weeks, she scrolled to Kenneth's number on her phone. The phone rang 4 times before I answered. I'd been expecting Christina's call for days, watching her situation deteriorate through my carefully maintained network of informants. When her name appeared on my screen at 2 o'clock Pacific time, I let it ring long enough to demonstrate that she no longer commanded my immediate attention. Hello, Christina. Her breath caught as if she had prepared for voicemail instead of conversation. Dad, I think we made a terrible mistake. I'm listening. The silence stretched across 3000 m. In the background, I could hear Michael's voice asking someone about homework. The innocent sound of a 10-year-old unaware that his parents' marriage was collapsing around his grandfather's calculated revenge. P.S. has been. She paused, choosing words carefully. He manipulated the situation at the airport, the things he said, the way he coached me. I don't think I was thinking clearly. What would you like me to do about that, Christina? I don't know. I need time to figure this out, to understand how we got here. Take all the time you need. I have other matters to attend to. I hung up gently, then immediately called Marcus Thompson at Highland Financial Services. Marcus had been my investment banker for 15 years, a sharp mind with an appreciation for creative financial strategies. Kenneth, good to hear from you. What's the project this time? I want to buy debt. Specifically, all the outstanding debts belonging to Pierce and Christina Morrison in Los Angeles. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then chuckled with professional admiration. Debt acquisition through shell company purchase. Brilliant. What's the target amount? Credit cards, medical bills, utility arrears. Probably $60,000 total. I want them to owe everything to me. We can structure this through Highland Financial. Most creditors will sell delinquent debt for 25 to 30 cents on the dollar. They'll be thrilled to get anything back. The next morning, I sat in Robert Steele's office reviewing acquisition documents that would make me Christina and Pierce's primary creditor. The legal strategy was elegant in its simplicity. When I owned their debts, I controlled their financial future completely. You're essentially becoming their bank, Robert observed, reviewing the paperwork. Every payment, every negotiation, every settlement goes through you. Exactly. And banks can set terms for debt forgiveness. Terms like what? I leaned back in the leather chair, thinking about Michael's tearful voicemails asking if he'd made Grandpa mad, public acknowledgement of their mistakes, behavioral modification, sobriety for Pierce, and a formal apology written and signed. Robert's professional admiration was evident, completely legal, financially sound, and psychologically devastating. Within 48 hours, Highland Financial had contacted every creditor holding Pierce and Christina's debt. First National Bank was eager to sell their delinquent credit card accounts. Pacific Medical Group accepted our offer for Pierce's emergency room bills from his drinking-related incidents. Even the utility companies were happy to recoup partial payments from debts they'd written off. My total investment, $18,500 to control $62,200 of their debt. Less than 1% of my savings to own their financial future. Marcus called Wednesday afternoon with the final numbers. Congratulations, Kenneth. Highland Financial Services now holds paper on the Morrison family. Every major debt they owe is yours to forgive or enforce. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the photo I'd carried since Michael's birth. Him taking his first steps toward me, arms outstretched, face bright with trust. Sarah's voice echoed in my memory. Don't let your hurt destroy your love. But love, I'd learned, sometimes required hard lessons. When do we deliver the settlement offer? Robert asked, preparing the formal documentation. I looked at Michael's photo one more time, then placed it face down on my desk. Tomorrow. It's time to end this. The process server arrived at Christina and Pierce's house at 9 a.m. on Thursday, delivering documents that would change everything. Christina signed for the certified mail with trembling hands, then sat at their kitchen table reading words that redefined their entire relationship with reality. Highland Financial Services now owned every major debt they carried, credit cards, medical bills, utility arrears, all of it purchased by a company that demanded immediate payment or acceptance of settlement terms. The settlement offer was attached complete debt forgiveness in exchange for formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, mandatory family counseling, P.S.'s sobriety commitment, and a written apology to Kenneth Hughes. P.S. read the documents twice before the magnitude hit him. He's destroyed us completely. Christina studied the settlement terms with growing clarity. Kenneth had the power to bankrupt them, force foreclosure, ruin their credit permanently. Instead, he was offering mercy with conditions that would rebuild their family rather than destroy it. He's offering to forgive $62,000. Pierce, it's a trap. Legal manipulation. No. Christina sat down the papers with sudden calm. It's exactly what Dad always did. Solve our problems while teaching us lessons we were too stubborn to learn. Pierce's desperation escalated into threats. If you call him, if you give in to this manipulation, I'll make sure you never see Michael again. Christina looked at her husband, drunk before noon, paranoid, financially reckless, threatening to use their son as a weapon against her own father. The man who'd systematically poisoned her mind against Kenneth's generosity. Mom is watching Michael this afternoon. I'm flying to New York. Christina, don't do this. You already did this, P.S., at the airport. When you convinced me that Dad's love was manipulation and his generosity was control, she grabbed her purse and car keys. I'm going to fix what you broke. The flight from LAX to JFK gave Christina 6 hours to review 15 years of Kenneth's support through Pierce's distorting influence. Wedding costs, medical bills, house down payment, failed business investment, COVID support, every major crisis in their adult lives resolved by her father's quiet generosity. She remembered the airport confrontation differently now. Kenneth's genuine confusion. The gift bag he dropped. His attempts to show them something they'd refused to see. Pierce's coaching beforehand. His aggressive opening attack. His satisfaction afterward. Central Park Cafe looked exactly as it had during her childhood visits to New York. The same corner table by the pond. Afternoon sunlight filtering through trees just beginning their summer fullness. Kenneth sat with his back to the water, wearing the blue cardigan she'd given him for Father's Day 3 years ago. He looked thinner than she remembered, older, but his posture carried the dignified composure she'd inherited and then abandoned under Pierce's influence. Dad. He stood as she approached, his manners automatic despite everything. Christina, she broke down immediately. 3 weeks of suppressed guilt and realization pouring out in tears that drew concerned glances from Mother Calf patrons. Kenneth waited quietly, his hands folded until her sobbing subsided. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so incredibly sorry. Kenneth reached into his jacket and pulled out a familiar envelope. Slightly wrinkled, the edges soft from handling. The $50,000 check made out to Christina Hughes Morrison dated May 15, 2025. I never came to take, he said quietly. I came to give. Christina stared at the check through her tears. Michael's birthday money. College fund contribution. Early graduation gift. Whatever you needed it to be. Kenneth's voice carried 15 years of hurt. I flew across the country to celebrate my grandson's 10th birthday and give his family a financial gift. Pierce turned it into a confrontation about dependency. He coached me on what to say. He told me you were getting too needy, too demanding. Christina wiped her eyes with Kef napkins. He made me believe your love was manipulation. P.S. was threatened by my relationship with you and Michael. Generous fathers-in-law make controlling husbands look inadequate. Christina nodded, understanding flooding through her like cold water. He systematically turned me against you. And I responded by showing him what real financial power looks like. Kenneth explained his campaign with the methodical precision of a business presentation, the debt acquisition, the professional network activation, the social pressure through community contacts. Christina listened with growing amazement at the sophistication of his revenge. You own everything we owe. Highland Financial Services owns it. I control Highland Financial Services. You could destroy us completely. Yes, but you're offering forgiveness instead. Kenneth looked across the pond where ducks were gathering for evening feeding. Your mother used to say that the best revenge is helping people become their best selves. Christina reached across the table, touching her father's hand for the first time in 3 weeks. What do you need from us to forgive this debt? Kenneth's answer was simple and devastating. What I've always needed, respect, and Pierce needs to change. Christina nodded, understanding the justice in his terms. I'll make sure he understands. 6 months later, Kenneth stood in Christina and Pierce's kitchen on Thanksgiving morning, watching his grandson carefully measure ingredients for cornbread stuffing. The house felt different now, organized, peaceful, free from the undercurrent of financial anxiety that had poisoned the atmosphere for years. Pierce entered from the garage carrying folding chairs, his movements purposeful rather than frantic. While 127 days sober, according to the chip he'd shown Kenneth with quiet pride the week before, his appearance had improved dramatically, clean-shaven, focused, treating Kenneth with genuine respect rather than Pierce's former manipulative charm. "Kenneth, thank you for the business books you sent." Pierce set up chairs around their expanded dining table. "The section on ethical networking is helping with my new position." Kenneth nodded acknowledgement. Pierce's transformation hadn't been instant or complete, but the changes were authentic. Weekly family counseling with Dr. Sarah Mitchell had taught him to recognize his manipulative patterns. Individual therapy helped him address the insecurity that had driven his need to control Christina's relationship with her father. "How are things at Tech Stable Solutions?" "Good, steady, boring compared to my startup fantasies, but stable income and honest work." Pierce's voice carried self-awareness that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. "I'm learning that boring can be a virtue in family life." Christina appeared from the living room carrying Michael's latest art project, a family portrait that included everyone, drawn in bright crayon colors that suggested happiness rather than obligation. She looked healthy again, having regained the weight she'd lost during their crisis. Her promotion at work had come through in September, a reward for renewed focus and reliability. "Dad, Michael wants to show you his science fair project before dinner." In Michael's bedroom, Kenneth examined a solar system model that demonstrated genuine understanding of planetary orbital mechanics. His grandson's grades had recovered completely once family stability returned. The private school readmission in August had been Kenneth's gift to Michael's future. "Grandpa, look what happens when I adjust Jupiter's position." Michael manipulated the model with careful precision. "It changes Mars' orbit completely." Kenneth smiled at the metaphor. Small changes in one planet can affect the whole system. Just like families, right? Exactly like families. Michael dinner conversation flowed with the ease of relationships rebuilt on honesty rather than resentment. Pierce shared updates about his AA sponsors' guidance. Christina discussed her clients' projects without the stress that had made her unreliable 6 months earlier. Michael chatted about friends, school activities, and his excitement about Kenneth's upcoming visit for his science fair presentation. During dessert, Pierce stood unexpectedly, wine glass filled with sparkling cider, in deference to his sobriety. "Kenneth, I owe you an apology that I should have made months ago." His voice carried the careful cadence of someone who'd practiced these words in therapy. "I systematically turned Christina against you because I felt threatened by your generosity. I convinced myself that your love was manipulation because it highlighted my own inadequacies. I poisoned our family with lies, greed, and control. But you've shown us what true strength looks like. Not revenge, but redemption. Thank you for giving us the chance to rebuild." Kenneth raised his glass, his eyes meeting Pierce's with measured forgiveness. "Apology accepted. Family isn't about perfection. It's about learning from the breaks." As the evening wound down, Christina squeezed her father's hand under the table. "We almost lost everything, Dad. But we gained something better. Understanding." Michael, oblivious to the depths of their journey, beamed at the table. "This is the best Thanksgiving ever, Grandpa. Promise you'll come for Christmas, too." Kenneth smiled, his heart finally at peace. "I promise, buddy. We're family. Stronger now than ever." In the quiet of his New York apartment weeks later, Kenneth reflected on Sarah's wisdom. Love endures through trials. He taught them the cost of ingratitude, but more importantly, the value of grace. The check had been a gift. Forgiveness, the greatest legacy. If you like the story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.